you think, Demi? Oh, the recording started. So I think that's the sign we're going to start as well. Starting with a little introduction to the great debate. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It is a great pleasure for me to officially welcome you all today to the third, as far as I remember, IAB Europe Great Debate on Sustainability. A lot has happened since our last great debate on the topic a year ago. And we have used these developments to put together what we hope will be an informative and entertaining 2-hour program for everyone. Let me take the chance to give you a brief overview. We start with a keynote from Dimitris, Beis, sustainability lead at IAB Europe. We will then move on to a short Q&A. The next step will be a panel discussion, also led by Dimitris. We look forward to welcoming their 3 guests. Anders, SVP General Counsel from Adform. Audrey, co-founder and Chief Product Officer of Impact Plus. And Katie, Sustainability Global Product Solution Lead at Sustainability from Google. I'm very much looking forward to this exchange in which we will explore how ecological sustainability will develop in the digital advertising industry in the next years. Finally, I will go into a fireside chat with Professor Lisa Charlotte Wolter from the International University of Hamburg. She founded last year a research center for sustainable media and marketing in collaboration with the University of Münster and the University of Florida, and is conducting fundamental research on the topic. We ask ourselves, mainly I ask Lisa, how media can strengthen social sustainability, a highly topical issue for a variety of reasons. So we are taking, but hopefully, you will see this then as well. So let's take off. Dimitris, the stage is yours. Once again, happy welcome to everyone, and please enjoy the great debate.
Thank you very much, Stefan, for your introduction. And congratulations on your election now as chair of the SSC. Looking forward to working together for the next 2 years. I'll start by sharing my screen, if that's okay, and take you through a couple of things for the keynote presentation. We'll start with the State of Readiness, Sustainability and Digital Advertising Report, and then we have some news to share about LEAF as well. So in general, we iterate on this survey every year. It's supposed to answer some pretty important questions around how the ecosystem perceives sustainability, but also what actions are being taken and what exactly drives the ecosystem's ambitions on the topic. This year, we received 102 responses from across different European markets. In some cases, those responses came from businesses that operate in a particular market, and there we can extract more information about sustainability in that particular country. But in a lot of cases, the responses came in from businesses operating either on a global level or a pan-European level. Just some information on the sample in terms of size of the organization as well as position in the supply chain. In general, this sample is quite similar in structure to last year's, although we did receive fewer responses compared to last year. Next year, we will be working more closely with national IABs to localize the survey and make it as accessible as possible. So we are able to collect data that really does represent as many local markets as possible. So I'm going to start with an overview of some of the results in terms of how the ecosystem currently perceives sustainability. With the first question being, of course, how does sustainability rank as a priority across all the different options that we provided for other areas of concern? First of all, there has been in general a perception that sustainability has fallen in terms of the ecosystem's priority list over the past year. Our survey data here would suggest that otherwise. We see that it remains as the second most important challenge, as opposed to it being ranked the third most important challenge in 2024, and addressability that was ranked quite highly last year fell significantly in the rankings. We think that at the end of the day, this is an indication that sustainability is still relevant to the ecosystem. Now, the extent to which we can come to any kind of ordinal conclusions from this data is questionable. We could be seeing other effects, such as respondents coming from companies that tend to be more active on the topic, and therefore some slight bias there. But overall, I would say that looking at the sample and how it compares to last year's, there's definitely enough data to say that sustainability is still part of the ecosystem's radar overall. Now, in terms of concerns within ESG, we did generally see a skew towards greenhouse gas impact and environmental sustainability in previous years. What's really interesting this year is a significant increase in respondents focusing on DE&I issues, in contrary to some recent global developments. And we see that in general, the social component of ESG is represented a lot more in this year's results. Now, in terms of the actions that the ecosystem supports to drive progress, in general, we do see consensus on most of those across the 3 different years that we have done the survey for. The most interesting, I guess, point to note here is that there's been some level of opinion shift on carbon offsets, in the sense that in previous results we saw a more negative approach to them, whereas here we see a more distributed approach that's kind of skewed towards the positive side, actually, on net. Another very important point, external verification. This has been a pretty standard data point for the past 3 years. We still see strong calls for verification, and also a lot of respondents saying that verification is ultimately required, but not yet. As we continue to do more work on standardizing how we understand digital ad emissions, and as the data that needs to be provided by each stakeholder group becomes clearer, there are bound to be even more conversations around how that data is verified and how it's sourced. And then one of the perhaps most interesting shifts from last year in this year's report, compliance with regulation overtaking client expectations as a driving force for sustainability. Of course, CSR remains the #1 driving force. We have heard about priority shifting as a response to regulatory obligations shifting. That more of our members are now interested in sustainability because they are looking to include emissions from media products in their reporting. However, the overall impact of more recent developments, such as Omnibus, remains to be seen in practice, and we are still waiting for obligations to become clear, both in terms of requirements and scope in a lot of different European markets. And then this question was quite interesting last year, where we saw a significant kind of dichotomy between one part of the ecosystem that saw sustainability as more of a vital component to the business model, and then another that saw it more as a threat. The portion of respondents that see it as a threat has gone down quite substantially. In terms of respondents that see it as a cost center, results are quite interesting. A lot fewer respondents agree with the premise, and a lot more disagree about an equivalent amount. And then in terms of sustainability being perceived as an opportunity for profit, we see that about half of respondents agree with that. Okay, so that covers our data on how the ecosystem sees sustainability. Now some information on how exactly it is progressing on sustainability. In general, we ask our respondents to give us general indication of their progress using these examples. Here, we see more organizations now describing themselves as having made some progress rather than just having started, which is a positive. And in the rest of the results, we're going to see quite a few indications that certain actions that would perhaps indicate more maturity in the ecosystem and sustainability becoming a more important component of how companies do business. Those are apparent. So first of all, really important point here, about 49% of respondents have estimated the environmental impact of some campaigns or some digital ad products. The percentage that have done so for all campaigns is significantly lower, but it does show that more ecosystem stakeholders are engaging with this kind of component of campaigns, and also that more of them are disclosing information about environmental impact to clients, 42%. This also shows that requirements for such disclosures or requests for such disclosures have probably increased. We see still strong participation in industry forums on sustainability. We've certainly seen that at IAB Europe with our Sustainability Standards Committee and the Framework and Methodology Working Group focused on the GNSF. And you see that about the same portion of respondents have completed or are in the process of completing a sustainability audit. Now, in terms of SBTi targets, we are seeing a lot of respondents considering setting targets or being in the process of setting targets. We have some net zero targets and some maintenance targets, but generally, these numbers are not substantially higher than previous years. We are seeing, however, more and more companies engage with SBTi overall, whether it is to set a near-term target or to start the process and set near-term and net zero targets. In terms of the overall emissions produced in the supply chain of digital ads, we're seeing a substantial increase again in the number of respondents from about a quarter to about half. And then about a third of businesses that estimate digital ad emissions include these figures in their environmental reports, again linking all of this back to the reporting requirements that I mentioned earlier. If we look at other actions that have been taken, SPO and DPO are still quite popular as they were last year, and also a big focus on implementing creative asset optimization, and then also work on sustainable media selection as well as creative production. Now, this is a slide that I personally find quite interesting. Here we compared how the ecosystem perceives what the ecosystem needs to do to what that particular responding organization has done already. And we see that although there is general consensus on the need to estimate the environmental impact of digital ad products, as well as on the need to set reduction targets, we still see that the ecosystem has a long way to go in terms of implementing both of these. And of course, this is a very important slide when it comes to developing a work plan and setting our priorities. The question of what are the key challenges to drive progress in the next year. We see that the lack of industry standards still came in first in this case, followed by the lack of education, the lack of transparency. These were popular responses last year as well, and it also kind of dictates what IB Europe will be focused on when it comes to its own initiatives on the area. A new question that was quite interesting to receive data for, whether the industry drives consumption of environmentally intensive products and should, in the long run, consider the carbon footprint of this consumption. We had about 68% of respondents agree or strongly agree with that statement. And here a quote from Anthony Falco. We've been working very closely with Net Zero on this question of standardization and the GMSF. So hopefully we'll be able to address that particular challenge in the following year. And then finally, some additional challenges that were shared by respondents for our consideration. Specifically, if we're looking at themes in the data, transparency came out a lot. Also, how sustainability is perceived within the organization and by clients. And in general, whether decision-making is more focused on short-term return or has enough kind of space for these more long-term considerations. So in summary, if we look at the State of Readiness report this year, it's one that tells a story of an ecosystem that remains aligned on the importance of sustainability. There is broad agreement on what actions need to be taken to support a more sustainable mode of operations. We're seeing evidence of important steps being taken in the right direction. More respondents have implemented their action plans. Definitely a substantial increase in how many organizations are estimating the impact of digital ad products, and also some progress on science-based targets, although we are seeing a lot of companies that are still in the process, and that is a significant process. It does take some time. At the end of the day, this question at the bottom here, perhaps one of the highlights of the survey, we ask the survey respondents to effectively rate the ecosystem's own progress on sustainability. We see that respondents were quite divided on overall progress on this particular topic. And of course, we did also receive, as I mentioned earlier, some interesting feedback on how we could improve on how we run the survey next year and perhaps capture an even broader part of the ecosystem and all the interesting data points that we can harness through this report. All right. Now that we've gone over some of the report insights, I'd like to talk a little bit about LEAF, which is IAB Europe's new platform for sustainability utilities. As you might know, we've taken learnings from the Sustainability Standards Committee and used those to develop utilities for our members. Open Greenhouse Gas is the utility for testing the digital ad emission standards that the Framework and Methodology Working Group has been focused on, and then Creatively was developed to show some of the work from our Sustainable Creatives Task Force. From now on, these and all other sustainability-related utilities that might be in the works will be housed under LEAF. And in general, its purpose is to support market education when it comes to these instances outputs, facilitate testing, and also as a way for us to receive feedback and improve upon the deliverables on which these utilities are based. These utilities will always be free for members, but we did receive quite a bit of feedback when we did the beta test for these utilities that members of national IABs also would like to be able to access them, so they will be accessible to non-members as well on a subscription basis. And here is a general overview of the LEAF project. We started in 2024 with the aforementioned beta tests. We also received quite a bit of feedback and that helped us plan future improvements. And then in March, we've now closed the beta tests. LEAF is now available for IAB Europe members, and starting in April, it will also be launched for non-members. So in terms of what we've done to update the utilities, on the open greenhouse gas side, we've updated it to match the new methodological proposal for digital ad emissions under the GMSF, and also given it a new UI. We will continuously update it as we see updates in the methodology in the GMSF development process. And also we hope to share some localized defaults for the GMSF based on our work with national IABs and the data RFIs that have been distributed. And then finally, we also have in mind the general ask for a solution to exchange contributed data. We don't know what the exact structure of that will be. Ultimately, that's something that we're discussing with Net Zero, but we do have that kind of on our list as well as something that needs to be worked on in the future. And then with respect to creatively, we've updated the image processing and also given it a new UI. And then finally, we're working on a new utility that's based again on our sustainable creatives work that's specifically focused on video. So in terms of access, all IAB Europe members can now register to use LEAF at leaf.iabeurope.eu. You'll have to wait for 1 or 2 days while we validate membership for each person that has registered, and then you'll be able to access all of our utilities indefinitely. For non-members, registration will become available on April 1st, and there will be more information to follow at the time of launch. So a little sneak peek on what the utilities look like now. For open greenhouse gas, we've reworked the UI, made it simpler so users can keep track of all of their campaigns. It gives you results across the different stages as aligned with the GMSF methodology. We have granular results per source of emissions and also split between use phase and embodied emissions, and all of the calculations again come directly from the proposal that we put together for the methodology update. In essence, this is taking all of that work and providing an easy way to play around with the current calculations, see clearly what kind of data points are required for each part of the calculations, and also a way for us to integrate all of the default values and be able to test what happens if any of those are changed, and also to be able to test those on a continuous basis as we look to improve the underlying methodology, specifically again focusing on contributed data, both for the programmatic supply chain as well as server intensity. And then finally, a little update on creatively, also given a fresh face. The compression modes are the same. There's a help page that explains exactly what creatively does and why it was developed. And you also get the same detailed results per format, as well as the option to download the compressed images across different formats. Okay, that's it. So I think now I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll take any questions. If there are any questions on either the state of readiness report, thank you for the question on LEAF. Does the LEAF website contain demo videos? No, it does not contain demo videos. we have produced demo videos for both of the utilities on the Leaf platform. Any other questions, either on the report or Leaf? All right. If not, then I believe that we do have the participants of the first panel on the call, and we can slowly get started with our next session. Hello.
Hello there.
Hi, how we doing?
Everything's great. Thank you for joining us. We'll just see if we have Audrey as well. Marion, I see you've raised a hand.
Hi, everyone.
Ah, it's
I think
Audrey
that there is
Marion's account. Okay, I understand.
I think that the link was planned for Marion, but I'm here.
All right. So since we have everyone, and by everyone I'm referring to Audrey Danthony, who's co-founder and CPO at Impact Plus, Andersen, who's SVP General Counsel and Adform, and Katie Usiak, who's the Ad Sustainability Global Product Solutions Lead at Google. We're ready to get started. So I'm gonna dive right into it with our first question, and feel free to also introduce yourselves as you answer. So to kick off, we just shared some interesting insights from the State of Readiness report, and of course the update on Leaf. Are there any particular data points that stood out to you while going through the report, or anything you'd like to comment on? So Anders, you can go first.
Yes, thank you, and hi everyone, and thanks for inviting me to take part of this, Dimitris. Shortly, first about me, I am Anders Andersen, and I'm a general counsel here at Adform. And in addition to my legal daily work, I also actually have the ESG responsibility across our business. But to answer the question, I think there were kind of two things when you went through the report, Dimitris, also, and when I read it, that still stood out to me as a bit of a surprise, which is ultimately the fact that the lack of industry standards and industry and lack of education still ranks as high as it does. I'm not surprised that it's up on the high end of it, but the fact that we're very close to 80-90%, I still think is pretty not concerning, but just a a bit of a surprise, I would say, simply due to the fact that there is actually a lot of material out there. There's a lot of committees that you can take part of. There's a lot of education that especially you from IAB Europe are doing in this field. So I'm really hoping that this will go down as we see this report in the coming years. Obviously, with LEAF coming out, as you just presented here, very, very soon, obviously, I really hope that this lack of industry standards especially will go down, because I think that's where we all struggle ultimately to figure out how we're going to measure this and how we're going to track it, and ultimately how we're going to speak the same language. So I think that was kind of that was my not biggest concern, but kind of biggest surprise when actually going through it.
Mm-hmm. I'm hoping that our work here will maybe help alleviate the concerns around this particular bottleneck. Audrey, how about we go to you next, and maybe you could share what you found interesting?
Yes, with pleasure. Thank you for the invitation, Dimitris, and hello to everyone who's attending. So I'm not Marion Cardona, I'm Audrey Danthony, co-founder and chief product officer at Impact Plus. Since 2020, we helped the digital advertising industry on both buy side and sell side to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions of ads. And we are also contributing to the GMSF standardization for digital ads and other LED channels like TV and OOH. So after these few words about Impact Plus, about the numbers, this is of course good to see that sustainability is now identified as the second key challenge for the industry. But the fact I'd like to underline is, for me, illustrating the next step to come. While most businesses agree on the need for emission tracking and reduction targets, only 14% of them have actually fully assessed all their campaigns. So that means that there is an important or huge execution gap if we compare the intent versus the reality.
Mm-hmm.
So the challenge is no longer awareness, it's about implementation, basically. It's implementation at scale, meaning going from one-time audits and proof of concepts to a situation where everyone is actually running automated monitoring and verifying continuously the improvements. So this is actually essential for a meaningful, impactful, and credible sustainability move in our industry. And to simplify and to achieve that, the company needs practical tooling, and that's what they say in the numbers, to run evaluation, reduction at scale. And we have published recently at Impact Plus a guide named Sustainability Simplified, and which is a step-by-step guide to anyone who wants to move faster and at scale to bridge this gap, because this is the next gap to be filled.
Mm-hmm. So always on estimation of impact and optimization of the buy. Very interesting. Katie, how about what you found interesting in the State of Readiness report?
Yeah, I'm happy to share. Excuse me. And thank you so much for having me. I've been really looking forward to this. So just to give a quick intro, first of all, hi, everybody. My name's Katie. I have been at Google now for 9 years. The first 8 of those I spent supporting CPG advertisers and utilizing Google Media to accomplish their business goals. And within this last year, I made the transition over into our ad sustainability efforts so that we can support advertisers' sustainable media needs. So really excited to be here. And I devoured the State of Readiness report and found it super interesting. And I think it's very much reflective of my own personal experience being in this role. And I feel like both of the 2 previous answers kind of touched on this as well, as it relates to emissions measurement and tracking and how that's kind of gained traction. So I think the stat that stood out to me the most in there was that it's the greenhouse gas emissions are still that top concern that companies have as it relates to ESG related concerns. And I think it was 48% of businesses now estimate emissions from digital media, which I saw to be a pretty big and substantial jump over the last year. I want to say it doubled or something to that effect. So I found that super interesting. And that's something that we've seen very much reflected in the curiosity we've seen from our advertisers, agencies, and actually even passionate Googlers have been asking similar questions around the environmental impact of advertising with Google Media. And so we've seen that interest grow. And it's actually one of the reasons that we recently announced and created Carbon Footprint for Google Ads, which some of you may have heard about. We made that announcement last week. Carbon Footprint reports estimate emissions that are generated by Google's infrastructure. So think like our data centers, for example, to power advertising across DV360, SA360, CM360, and Google Ads accounts. And so it's interesting to have seen that sort of consistent traction and interest in measurement in the report, because that's something we've seen reflected from the requests that we've been getting from our partners as well. And so that reporting for carbon footprint is developed in accordance with both the Greenhouse Gas Protocol and the newly established Global Media Sustainability Framework that AdNet and IAB Europe have been leading. So just interesting to see consistent threads of curiosity across the board.
So great to hear updates on, as Audrey mentioned, the tooling. I think the increased availability of these services is, of course, in itself a sign that the ecosystem is keen to address the environmental impact of digital ad products, and of course, its environmental impact overall as a collection of enterprises. And the reason we have gathered you here today is to talk about some of our objectives, specifically until 2030. It's a very important date as a milestone in many sustainability plans. So perhaps we could start talking a little bit about this milestone in different reduction plans, and maybe you could share some information on your own company's sustainability goals. Katie, Google, of course, has quite a developed corporate sustainability plan. Would you like to talk about some of these targets?
Yeah, definitely. I think since our founding, our efforts to mitigate climate change have really started within our own house and within our own operations. And so just as a couple examples, we began purchasing clean energy in 2010. And actually in 2017, we became that first major company to match 100% of our electricity consumption on a global and an annual basis with renewable energy purchases. So something we're still super excited about. And now that we've achieved that 100% renewable energy milestone and that matching goal, we've adopted an even more ambitious one. So our new goal is our 24/7 carbon-free energy. We call it CFE. By 2030 goal. And so that would mean our data centers are running on every hour of every day on renewable energy sourced from within the same grid. And so we have goals to achieve 24/7 carbon-free energy and net zero emissions across all of our operations and our value chain by 2030. So 2030 is the name of the game.
Yeah, the 2030 CFE goal is certainly quite impactful. Thank you for mentioning it. Anders, we've discussed your own first steps in this space. Would you like to share a bit more?
Yeah, definitely. So last year in 2024, we signed up to Science-Based Targets Initiative and ultimately committing to that for near term. And maybe it's a lawyer in me saying this, but before we set any goals, we actually wanted to understand our baseline. So the last 12 months, we have been working quite tirelessly on actually figuring out what is our baseline. It's fairly easy on scope 1 and 2, and it gets tricky on scope 3. But we've partnered with an external verification provider to get it all set in stone. We're actually releasing our updated ESG report here next week. So that will be really exciting to come to fruition. But ultimately, then obviously next steps a little bit what you're also talking to, Audrey. It's about then like now we need to put things in action, and that's what we're going to do. So that's the next steps, and we haven't set those goals yet simply because we have just gotten the baseline, you could say. But as everyone probably knows, SBTi requires you to do it within 2 years, so the clock is ticking, and we have full focus on that. A little bit similar to Katie and then on the Google side, we have actually been very fortunate with Adform that we for many years, especially on our European data centers, have been running on green energy. We have our own data centers. We're not in a public cloud setup, so we have full control on that. And in Europe, we have been able to confirm that for many years, which is something we're proud of. We still have a little bit of work to do, especially especially in North America, but that also is actually nice because then it kind of knows where we need to start attacking things and start to do things when it comes to the optimization, such that we can hit our to-be set targets here sometime in 2024.
And I think approaching this question as a lawyer certainly has its merits, really understanding what the commitment means and what it entails, taking it step by step with the emissions inventory first. I think those are signs of an organization taking this issue seriously and understanding that certain targets do require some level of investment, certainly some attention in order to be met. On this question of how exactly we meet those targets, you already mentioned, Anders, some information about your data centers, but I wanted to go back to Audrey, who works tirelessly every day to reduce media emissions. Audrey, what kind of emission sources are you focused on when it comes to reducing the carbon footprint of campaigns, and then as we scale that up, of companies within the digital ad ecosystem?
So before focusing on the source itself, I will take my product education hat to try to explain to the audience the greenhouse gas emissions of digital advertising. So as this is the top priority according to the report, I think it's important to explain that in a few words. So there are 3 tiers which are involved in the digital advertising greenhouse gas emissions. The first tier is the servers, which are used to deliver the ad. There is a second tier, which is the end user devices, which are the support of the ad consumption. And there are the third tier, which are the networks between both. For each tier, the greenhouse gas emissions are actually split into 2 parts. The first part is the emissions due to the electricity consumption needed to power the devices, such as the servers, such as the router and the user devices. And the second part, which is named embodied emission in the jargon, includes the greenhouse gas emissions due to the steps of manufacturing, transportation, end of life of all these digital devices. So to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions and the total of the greenhouse gas emissions, the marketers, the ad techs, and the publishers need, of course, to limit the electricity consumption of the servers, of course, using green electricity also, and also work to limit the usage of the infrastructures, the networks, and the user device, and the number of the devices which are used in these processes. So we have worked since 2020 with a lot of industry bodies to build some best practice guides that are now well known and documented. From these best practice guides, what I see the most frequently used by our clients or other people on the industry is that first, there is the reduction of the complexity of the ad tech stack, limiting the number of calls, limiting the number of measurement scripts, simplifying the supply chain. Everything that is transmitting data, calling an API, should be actually assessed to keep only what is really, really, really useful for the operation. That's the first topic. The second topic we see the most is the work on the creative, and that's what the report says. And that's also due to the fact that the IAB Europe has pushed in this direction also. It's not only a question of reducing the resolution of a video, it's also reducing the duration of them. For example, delivering a 30 seconds video on a placement where the ad would be actually viewed 1 to 2 seconds has no sense. So marketers begin to understand that and to adapt the creative to the placement they would use. And on the creative itself, it has been proved a lot of time now that limiting some resolution, limiting some and improving the compression rates most of the time don't have any impact on the media performances. And the third action that I see more and more, and which is good news, is about automation. The agencies are now automating the media buying using DSP's capabilities, such as specific optimization, so specific bidding. And for that, they are ingesting third-party KPIs. Our clients are using data transfer capabilities. And these KPIs are feeding the machine learning algorithms with greenhouse gas emissions. So their DSPs are now identifying in which context to bid to maintain both good media performances and to reduce their environmental impact. That's a key element here that is really a trend during the last few months, is that agencies are taking the lead on this topic.
Mm-hmm. And of course, taking the lead in reducing Scope 3 emissions for advertisers when it comes to media, which is a Scope 3 category that is definitely substantial when you look at any corporate sustainability report within the ecosystem, and in some cases can be quite substantial even when compared to other emission sources of large advertisers, depending of course on the vertical that they're active in and the type of products and services that they offer. So that's a great overview of actions being taken when we're looking at this Scope 3. Maybe Anders, can go back to you when it comes to Scope 1 and 2 and your own ambitions. Are there particular emission sources that you were focused on when you're building out your inventory, and then later on when you set your targets?
Well, I think the data center piece that I already addressed is one where we can control it ourselves. So that makes it a little bit easier. And then per Audrey's point, like being a tech platform, ultimately speaking, we can only educate our clients to actually try and enable these features and think about it. But to put it simply, we're open for business. So we're not necessarily going to decide whether or not how our advertisers or agencies are going to actually engage and what they are going to do. We will take the business. That's the business that we are in, helping to get the messages out there ultimately. But of course, we are full stack technology provider as well. So, supply path optimization, similar to other players like Google who have that. Obviously, the less it stays within the same pipes, the less emissions there are. And that's obviously something we're trying to drive and educate on as well. One of the other things that we're actually trying to do that we do have a lot of control over is we actually try and check our code. And I know this sounds a little bit simple, but green coding is a concept. I don't know what it means in detail, but ultimately speaking, we're actually trying to see every time we do an optimization and the maintenance of our tech stack, and we have a lot of code. We actually try and track it. Are we faster? Do we use less capacity? Do we use less energy? Can we utilize the machines in a more efficient manner? And that is actually something that helps a lot because it's again something we can control. So we really try and focus on that, and then we try and educate, as I said, on the Scope 3, because that's where we start losing the control a little bit compared to well, maybe it's a little bit different for Katie. I don't know. They have a little bit more say in the negotiation table than a medium-sized player like Adform, I would argue.
But perhaps with what you're sharing, we'll see the first carbon-aware ad tech stack coming from Adform. So super excited if you're able to ever share any more insights about that. And I'm sure there's a lot of interesting work happening at the platforms as well, looking at things like balancing load across locations and where you have more carbon efficient energy. Katie, let's go back to you. What kind of priorities do you have when you're looking at meeting your targets? You already mentioned perhaps your most ambitious target being the CFE, but what else is under your consideration?
Yeah, happy to. I think there's kind of two pieces that I'll talk about. One is sort of that infrastructure piece. I know there was mention on data centers, and we're doing a lot of work there. My team is more specifically focused on how our sustainability goals connect to ads, and basically how we are supporting our advertisers and their sustainable media needs. And so the main focus of our ad sustainability working group has been on basically taking action to set a better foundation for measurement. And so that's where the carbon footprint reporting I mentioned earlier kind of comes in, but I'll kind of give a peek behind the curtain on what we've been up to and getting that set up and stood up over the last year, which is our ad sustainability working group has spent a lot of time partnering with you all on IAB Europe and Ad Net Zero in months worth of methodology standardization working groups, like the GMSF, for example. So we've done a lot of work there. And then a lot of us have also been just hearing directly from our key partners and advertisers and agencies and brands on what it is that they need from a measurement standpoint and some of the goals that they have there. And so we had many roundtables with those sorts of partners and customers to basically hear from them on if Google's first-party data and carbon footprint is helpful in meeting the demands that they have for more precise ads emissions measurement. So a lot of work has been done there. And then in terms of what this actually measures, which kind of connects to that sort of data center lens that has already been discussed. So carbon footprint for Google Ads covers emission sources that are tied to our infrastructure. So our data centers piece. And so this includes the measurement from carbon footprint includes processes like competing in ad auctions, serving the ad, AI-based operations that are used in ads activities and platform interfaces. So as you're clicking around and looking into reporting, for example, and bidding. So that's kind of what that measurement focus of that reporting is bringing. And so with that, it also incorporates in sort of formulas based on our activity that we're seeing based on our infrastructure. So it relies on machine level power usage, activity monitoring from directly inside of that Google infrastructure, like our data centers. So lots of data center activity went into that. And we also have a team that focuses on sort of efficiencies and efforts in data centers specifically. So the work that we're doing kind of complements the broader sustainability org's efforts to minimize emissions from that Google infrastructure. So just a quick example of what that would look like. As an example, as compared to 5 years ago, Google's data centers are now on average more than 1.8 times as energy efficient as the typical enterprise data center. And we're now delivering approximately 4 times as much computing power with that same amount of electrical power. So I think we're thinking about it from an ad sustainability lens around measurement. And then we have those wider efforts that are focused on things like efficiencies within infrastructure and carbon-free energy.
So on an enterprise level, you're really focused on data centers, and then what's important with the product level offering is, of course, to allocate all that first-party data down to particular campaigns. Stressing, of course, that having this first-party data in the first place is very important, and that when you look at complex data center operations, there's really a limitation to how much you can do as a third party doing some kind of bottom-up modeling, and having first-party data will give you the better view into how much exactly you can attribute to each particular placement or each particular campaign. So great to hear that there's a connection now between the enterprise level efforts to reduce carbon footprint and also the product level relationships with clients and what kind of data that they might be requesting. Okay, so as we discuss sustainability strategies, we always get this question after panels. How exactly does the ecosystem act around sustainability in a situation where economic outlook is worse, there's some headwind, margins are tighter, organizations are cutting and becoming more lean? How much focus do organizations still place on sustainability? How resilient are these plans and targets? Audrey, maybe starting with you, how exactly do you see different client of yours or potential clients of yours evolving their sustainability plans as a function of what's going on in terms of general economic outlook?
So, of course, with global economic uncertainty, business tend to unprioritize initiatives that don't show, let's say, immediate ROI. But the reality is that sustainability is no longer nice to have. It's become a compliance requirement. It's becoming a key factor for long-term business resilience. And sometimes it can also increase ROI by limiting waste. So I think that on the marketer side of the things, the marketers of the biggest brands have understood that. They really stick with their ambitions of reduction. I'm not sure that on the sell side and on the ad tech side, it's completely the same mood. I have the feeling that on the sell side, and that's the numbers that the report show, but not completely. There is still a fear, and this fear still exists, that the rise of sustainability KPIs will disturb the market, perhaps by giving to advertisers a new level of negotiation, or perhaps a fear also that the transparency which is needed to progress collectively on sustainability could harm basically their own business. So I think that's why some players are still a bit reluctant of sharing information that could help to evaluate correctly the impact of advertising. And this lack of data sharing, it's limiting the possibilities for the industry to do the right choices and to improve collectively the processes that are connecting all the players, because we are a complete interconnected industry. So when economic uncertainty is increasing, anyone is trying to protect their organization, and there is a risk that actually for the sustainability progresses to be slowed down by this protection action, let's say. From my perspective at Impact Plus, I see it as an opportunity for organization, much rather than any other risk. Because companies that integrate actually sustainability into their core operations would be in the next few months and years in a much stronger position, both financially and environmentally. Because that doesn't, this is not only about compliance, it's also because it will help businesses to fight and to navigate against economic fluctuation. I would say that the operations would be more efficient, more future-proof, because when digital resources scarcity will increase, and that will increase rapidly because of the speed on which we are building new business centers and servers and data centers. The price of providing digital services will increase a lot. And eco-design then would be the key for any organization competitiveness. So what Anders mentioned, like eco-designing the softwares, eco-designing the ad, because at one point the networks will cost more, is key for any ad tech company for its future competitiveness.
I think it's really interesting to point out that sustainability can be an opportunity for many organizations. I think that to some extent also justifies some of the uncertainty caused by sustainability as a topic. I.e., if sustainability can make some organizations winners, then there's a flip side of that as well, right? So I guess that we are seeing some organizations that, because of all this uncertainty, perhaps don't feel as comfortable moving forward with some of the actions that we've talked about, including being more transparent about operations. So Anders, going to you then with the same question about sustainability strategies. How do you think these are likely to be affected by what's going on in terms of demand from clients and margins, et cetera?
It's a great question, and it really is. And in theory, I very much agree with Audrey because I do think she's very right about everything she's saying, and it is the right thing to do is to continue to invest in it. But if I have to be a bit honest, and kind of also what we're seeing, and now I'm kind of going out of the sustainability department here, and I'm probably taking on a bit of a CFO slash investment hat. I still think there is, and the study also confirms that there is still some, like, what's the business case? What's in it for me? Should you be a first mover? Should you take a little bit of a wait and see approach? And honestly, that is still what we are seeing. Like, we have a offering, well, we partner with someone, and we can just see that even though it actually, that collaboration shows same or better performance, people don't click the button in our platform, ultimately speaking. And that's the marketers, that's the agencies out there. And I think that kind of says we all want it, but there is still this, like, people have to kind of put their money where their mouth is to some extent. And I still think there is a bit of a wait and see game in that. And I think that's sad, but I think that's the reality. And I do think, again, with the CFO kind of approach thinking that I'm currently presenting here, is that you don't necessarily, unless you're really, really successful and really, really profitable, like, it is all about sub-optimization. Some companies are listed, they have short-term goals, they have investors who demand X, Y, Z. Others are not, and they can maybe afford to be a bit more long-term thinking. It really depends on where you are in that space. And I think that is something that still drives some of that uncertainty. And then with that, jumping over to the omnibuds from the European Commission, kind of ultimately pushing the reporting requirements. Again, the lawyer talking here. 2 months ago, we were all forced to, now we have to do it, and it was kind of just mandatory. And it kind of, that regulation, it was very easy to open the door to the boardroom and saying, hey guys, you have to have your financial reports audited. That has been the case for, decades. Now it's coming on ESG, and deal with it. It was an easy conversation starter, ultimately speaking. Now we are in phase 2. So we are in that company who currently thinks it's pretty uncertain, actually. Do we have to report next year or not? Likely not, is what it seems like, but nothing is approved finally out of the Commission, out of the EU in general. So I think that will then take that, like, we have to do something because it's a legal requirement or it's a regulatory obligation, and then it's more out of goodwill, or we have to do something, it's the right for our kids and our grandkids and so forth. So I think that if there's then on top of that uncertainty on economics, trade wars potentially looming, we still have obviously the unfortunate situation with the Ukraine and Russia. It depends what the CFO is and what are they going to do. Are they going to be at the forefront, or are they going to be a little bit more reluctant? And maybe I'm just not an optimistic person here, but I do see it actually changes some behavior. To be very frank.
Well, certainly sounds like a pragmatic perspective. Noting in particular that it sounds like you're not seeing as much of a strong signal from clients when it comes to some of the sustainability-oriented features, as you mentioned, clicking the button and the numbers you have around.
Sorry for interrupting you, because I actually forgot to mention one thing, but you starting to speak. We get a lot of RFPs, obviously. We compete in those against the Googles of the world on a daily basis. We're tracking how many questions we get in this field. And it is very, very little. And unfortunately, it's only the true big players who actually ask questions about it. It is still not something we see on the daily that becomes in. There might be 1 or 2 questions where we get 200 on how the platform works and how we do X, Y, Z over there. So from the decision-making side, I still think that it's technology and technology capabilities and price that drives it. And I see, unfortunately, still less of the broader global sustainability. That's kind of a part of that decision making. It happens, but it is not on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm. So the conclusion we can draw is that if regulatory constraints are still unclear for companies like yours, for example, might be unclear also for some of the organizations that are sending you these RFIs. Therefore, in a year where we have additional uncertainty, not just about regulation, but also about some more fundamental things related to the success of these businesses, there are questions being raised about the extent to which sustainability remains a priority. And thank you for sharing that, because this is the great debate after all. So it's good to be able to foster different opinions. Audrey, is there anything you'd like to follow up on this particular question?
I would say that it's interesting to see the difference between perspective here. What I see more currently is that perhaps agencies are more under pressure with RFPs about sustainability than ad techs. My vision is that perhaps in the future, hopefully, this obligation would be transmitted, obligation of reporting, obligation of applying best practices. I see it more focused on agencies yet, and perhaps they would apply it in the supply chain in the next few months.
Interesting about this obligation kind of being transferred down the supply chain. I think if we look at advertising overall, sure, a big part of the spend comes from these huge clients that are likely to fall under all of these scopes for these disclosure obligations. But a substantial part of it also comes from the tail, right? And these are organizations that are smaller, not necessarily looking at emissions at all, let alone media emissions. So I guess this kind of distribution will also dictate the extent to which different organizations in the ecosystem get all of these RFIs, right? At the point at which some of the organizations beyond just the huge advertisers or huge agencies are interested in developing their own inventories, including media, we might see more of a shift there. Okay, thank you very much for your answers on that question. Katie, going back to you, I'd like to get perhaps your perspective on what exactly is moving things. So we have, in our report, a lot of information about client expectations and investors and CSR, and also an important point you mentioned earlier, which is satisfying asks by employees and employer branding. Which factors do you see as driving the conversation and driving your actions on sustainability on a day-to-day?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we're seeing interest from multiple angles, in all honesty. I do think, to the tune of some of the call outs earlier about regulation, we did see regulation requirements certainly having an impact on kind of that urgency factor that we saw in the industry from a couple of years ago when a lot of the initiatives really started launching. So I think that added kind of a sense of urgency and just general interest early on. But I think we're also seeing interest from varying groups, both internally and externally. For example, for ads carbon footprint, for the Google ads, carbon footprint for Google ads. It's very early my time. There was so much collaboration that really went into that, both of which included hearing from our advertisers what they were interested in and coming to us and really asking for support and understanding more of their environmental impact of their advertising. So I think that was a huge voice at the table. But also I think internally we have done a lot to listen to some of our teammates internally and really use their expertise. And I've been super passionate about working on this because it's taken a huge village with a whole range of folks with varying expertise to make a dent in kind of this massively important space. And I do think the opportunity is huge if we do it right. Just to give you an idea of some of the teams internally that collaborated on this, there were many different types of functions, like sustainability, of course, weighed in heavily. We had product and eng come to the table for this. We had marketing experts and a lot of strategy side, collaboration to really make sure multiple perspectives were heard. And we also had varying levels of seniority to also make sure we were able to make the decisions and kind of move forward to bring something to the table that advertisers could really use. And so it was an all hands on deck sort of effort where many passionate people played a key role in really getting this off the ground. So started with kind of hearing from folks externally and really looking to collaborate internally to figure out what we could do about it to support. And I think that's really important because there's just sustainability is too big and too many nuances exist for any one single team or organization to really have all of the answers individually. And so that sort of collaborative piece, both internally and externally, is extremely important. And I think that also goes to show that we should get as comfortable sharing and collaborating as we can in order to kind of tackle this collectively. So I think the more that we collaborate and the more we broadly share for us all to learn together, I think that's where impact really comes. But in terms of the interest that we saw, it really came from all angles. And I think we had to collaborate a lot externally and internally to figure out the right way to move forward.
Thank you. And you mentioned a lot of passionate people working on this project. Is that to say that there is an impact from the level to which each particular employee cares about the environmental footprint of what they're working on, and that this is also a driving force when it comes to developing such services?
I think our employees are extremely passionate about this. It's something when I first joined onto this team, before any sort of announcements were even made about it, so many people were reaching out to me to learn more. So I've been personally extremely inspired, just knowing not just how passionate folks are, but how curious and how informed people have made themselves to really help support and learn more about this. So yes, lots of passionate Googlers on this.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and thankfully lots of passionate people across the ecosystem, because they make our strongest contributors when it comes to IAB Europe instances and all the work we're doing. Anders, let's go back to you with the same question. What do you see driving efforts on sustainability in your perspective?
Like I think it's threefold. A little bit what Katie is saying, we have a push internally as well. Maybe not just on sustainability, it also goes to DEI initiatives and so forth. Clearly, we're being held accountable, and that's really good because it matters to everyone. So we definitely have an internal push and also willingness. I alluded to it, I think, on the last question also, but clearly the regulatory pressure that is maybe will stay there is definitely something that just brought that attention to it, because if we have to report, we have to get our house in order. Otherwise, we simply can't do things. And it also actually made it, and I think it's a bit of a shame that CSRD is kind of being kicked out in the future for some years, simply due to the fact that it was a way to align. And I know there's some reporting in it, but at least it gave that alignment piece, and therefore it drove the attention. But we are seeing it. We do have great advertiser clients. It tends to be the bigger ones who actually put it in as a requirement and who drive from their procurement departments or from their sustainability departments. They are inviting us to come in and say, hey, what are you guys doing about that? Could we do more here? We want to. In order for us to make our impact based on our targets, you need to help us. And in that regard, a little bit of a CSDD reference here as well, obviously, because it is kind of being kicked down to the suppliers, up to the big organizations. So I do think, and again, maybe it is just a lawyer and me saying this, but I actually do think that regulatory changes are helping, simply due to the fact that it's then something you cannot avoid any longer. It's not only due to your good hearts or you having a strategy or something like that, but it kind of forces you to go that way. So we see the pressure all over. But as I said earlier, I don't think we see enough pressure actually from our advertisers and the agencies. Maybe it's coming, Audrey, or maybe it's just because we already have contracts with them and then therefore they're not pressuring as much. I don't know. But generally speaking, I do think that we need a pressure that way, because that way we can also pressure on into the ecosystem and so forth. So I think it will come, but how fast? I think that's still to be seen.
Right. So still aligned with this idea that it needs to come from advertisers originally, apart from the regulatory piece. Interesting to hear that you're not seeing enough of it based on your response. Audrey, back to you. What's your perspective? What do you see moving things? And perhaps you'd like to share a perspective that also connects to the extent to which advertisers are interested, even beyond just the really big global advertisers. What do you see?
So first time, I'm totally aligned with what Katie and Anders said about the internal power that the workforce has to make organization change, let's say.
Sure.
And I don't forget that the digital industry is purely business driven, as any other industry, of course, but perhaps sometimes more. There is one point to take in account, is that brands are conscious that they have to move forward on their supply chain decarbonization. They know it, and they know that it will be long, and they know that they won't. It's not a good idea to wait for regulation fluctuation to launch these processes, because they already have launched these processes on Scope 1 and Scope 2. And they know that the digital activities, not only ads, but digital activities are representing an important part, of their Scope 3 emissions. So with no hesitation, when there is brand expectations, this is where it has the most influence, because companies in our industry have the agility, have the teams, have the mindset to innovate, to make things better. They have everything to make it happen, but they need the reason to do it, as Anders says. But when companies in our ecosystems, such as agencies, or sometimes such as AdTechs, receive RFPs with sustainability requirements, they move fast. Because new business is always the best reason to make a company move.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that I like to precise is that when we speak about sustainability requirements, it shouldn't be focused only on evaluation of the impact. It shouldn't be focused only on reporting, and that's a message for advertisers which are in these groups. It should be also mentioning obligations of putting in place best practices. Because if they want the industry to move forward, they need to tell the people what they think they have to do. And the good news is that when the decision is made and supported by the business, when this is in the case of RFP, for example, the implementation of the evaluation or the implementation of the best practices is efficient, it's easy, it's fast, and it's performance proofed. So there is not a lot of impacts on the media performance itself or anything about the results that the ad tech will give to their advertiser. So that's good news. That's basically easy. That just needs a small push of a few questions in an RFP.
But the capacity is there, and that's a positive note, I think, to end things on. I'd like to thank all three of you for being part of the discussion today. Very interesting to hear your perspectives, and happy to see some different perspectives being shared as well. Just in terms of process, we have some questions. We'll look to follow up on those after the event, and we will also share the recording for the panel. Last note from each of you, and again, thank you very much for joining this panel today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, perfect. So Stefan, I think it's time to go back to you and the very interesting Fireside chat that we have planned. Really looking forward to this myself. So all yours, take it away.
Thank you very much, Dimitris. Yeah, please, dear IAB colleagues, if you would promote Lisa to the speakers panel. Meanwhile, there she is, dear Lisa. I'm really delighted that we are having you with us today. Before I'm going to ask you the first question, I would like to give a brief introduction to the topic from my perspective for all listeners. So I'm particularly pleased to have Lisa on the call today either way, but also in view of the Scope 3 latest product development. After all, Scope 3, as most of you know, has been one of the major players in the decarbonization of advertising for years, for the last 3 or 4 years now. However, they are now moving out of the corner of CO2 issues and are also addressing brand safety and suitability topics with their new AI-driven product. And these topics, brand safety and suitability, are often going in detail, often hand in hand with many social and societal issues. So in my opinion, the new developments on their side fits in very well for Scope 3 as a company, because it fits very well in with sustainability as an extension, which is being analyzed or seen as ESG in the political and regulatory business context. And so it is also a correspondence to my everyday personal corporate life as a sustainability head, for example. Of course, now we still have to see how the product details are developed by Scope 3, but you and we won't be able to evaluate it at the end properly if we don't understand, from my perspective, the complexity of sustainability in media and marketing as a holistic challenge and approach. And this is where you, Lisa, come in with your research center. So great to have you with us. Would you please begin by introducing yourself and sharing an overview of your work at your research center?
Yeah, sure. First of all, Stefan, thanks for your leadership in the topic in our industry. We are working, I think, since 3 years together on this topic in different symposiums and events. And yeah, I really enjoy the discussion with you, and thanks for having me. Just quickly about me. In a nutshell, I'm a professor in online marketing and customer centricity at IU, International University of Applied Sciences. We are the largest private university in Germany. And besides my professorship, I've been managing the Research Center for Sustainable Media and Marketing since last year. And my focus with the Research Center is on developing value-based metrics for media and marketing, which go beyond one-dimensional economic efficiency. And I work together with experts from academia and industry. And yeah, going back, I mean, I don't have to tell you, this group is aware of it. The media industry has traditionally relied on short-term economic performance metrics a lot. But I mean, we are all aware of our changing world, and our perspective is that we need more sophisticated additional KPIs that reflect especially the social and governance impact of media, and is also aligning with ESG. And I like to share. Can you see the chart?
Yeah.
Yeah. I like to show the metrics from a Standard & Poor's report in my presentations when I start with the topics usually. Because what we could see in the past few years is that many sustainability discussions focus primarily on ecological factors like carbon emissions, which is of course very important. I mean, I don't want to underestimate it, but our research highlights that the media supply chain has far-reaching social and governance implications that need to be addressed in a KPI. That's what we are working on. And that's why we need a solid value media scale. We call all these different factors, which are more on the S and G value media. That's our working definition for this area. And what we are trying to do is taking the opportunity to align media planning and the reporting perspective. So our approach is guided mainly by 3 core principles. We don't want to have a black box approach, so we try to ensure that all stakeholders in the industry have a voice in our research center, so advertisers, agencies, media companies, tech providers. And we are doing this by doing regularly stakeholder surveys and with our value media board. And on academic side, we have different disciplines involved in our team. So, people from media economics, social sciences, sustainability research, technology, and more. And what we are trying to do is that we find a KPI which will be widely accepted and also actively used. So that's why we engage directly with industry players. And I think that sustainability metrics in media will only work if they are developed in a cooperative and transparent way, rather than being imposed top down. We saw it, I think, with different initiatives in the past. And so our role at the research center is to ensure that the whole process is academically sound and empirical tested, but also practically applicable, because we can present our scales in academic conferences and papers, but we want to align it with the industry and also with a broader ESG materiality framework. So the Standard & Poor's report shows really clearly that we have a huge impact with media on social factors.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So your focus is on one hand side on long-term KPI, holistic KPI relevances to extend them, and with a strong focus also on the broad baseline of different stakeholders. So as far as I see it, this is an interdisciplinary academic approach as well, by integrating ecological, social, and social perspectives. So from your perspective, do you think this could strengthen the actual given digital advertising industry by seeing the world more as by seeing the challenge more as an holistic and interdisciplinary challenge?
Definitely. Also, what we heard in the good discussion before is that we need align with our standards, and we cannot separate ESG. We have all 3 aspects, and that's what we need to include in the perspectives. And what we also try with our definition. I can show you what we define with value media. And the most important thing is that we include in our definition the individual value. So we have the consumer integrated in the definition. So we have the media, the society, and the individual consumer, which is the user. And that's what we call the value triality. And it ensures that media sustainability is not just about emissions. It is about creating value for brands, so advertisers, media companies, and society simultaneously. So that's what we try to develop, and it should be a truly scalable framework. And what we also need is the global insights from different markets. I don't think that we should have it on a regional level, our work. So I can show you what we are doing right now. We are trying to develop our global research network in academia. And
you're going to this. Maybe go one step back to the question of values, because I think that's a very interesting point to see you working on different ideas of or understandings of value. I remember in this case always, you know him as well, Dr. Martin Andre, with his question of values about cars, the Mercedes Sprinter, which is on the one hand side probably used as a personal fun car in the mountains, or on the other hand side it could be an ambulance, so which totally on both sides gives some kind of value. But at the end, the challenge with the term value, isn't it some ethical and philosophical question as well in there?
What we are trying to do is that we narrow it down to a very evidence-based discussion, so that it's not a philosophy. And value, of course, is different for each user or segment. And that's why we integrated and trying to see it not from our perspective as media planner or researcher, that we say that's quality. So that's why we're also avoiding the term quality and use value media instead of quality media, because we don't want to say what is good or bad in terms of quality content and environment. That has to stay at the user or consumer side. So the consumer needs to decide what's good for them in the end. And that's what we're trying to incorporate in our definition.
Thank you very much. So feel free to go on.
Yeah, I just wanted to show you because I thought probably could be interesting for the IAB Europe, that we are enlarging our network globally, and we are just starting with new projects. For example, with Poland, they are very strong in at the institute in researching innovations in media financing models that especially help smaller media companies to stay competitive through sustainable partnerships. That is something that we start this year, or the partnership with the USA and Finland, for example. We are looking with the researchers in these countries on trust in media and advertising effectiveness, providing new models for value-driven media investments. And also interesting, I think, will be the cooperation with China and South Korea, very tech-driven countries, especially South Korea. And with them, we are going to work on development of AI-driven media planning and data-based ad strategies that can also optimize sustainable ad placements in the future.
Beautiful. But let's try to be a little bit more concrete. That how's about the application of your academic findings? How can the research findings from your center can be translated at the end in actionable strategies for industry stakeholders?
Yeah, and that's really, of course, challenging. And I think integration in the research and development process is key. I mean, integration of all stakeholders. And yeah, to achieve industry-wide adoption of a value media scale or score, what we are developing on the academic side, we have established a so-called Value Media Consortium at the IAU. By the way, we have our first meeting this afternoon. And there are already some major media companies in Germany which are joining the consortium. And it's a collaborative industry board. And we try to ensure with the collaboration and the board, that we have a very broad stakeholder involvement from the beginning. So advertisers, agencies, media owners, tech companies, all can give their daily challenges and also opportunities into the whole research process to develop the scale. And we are jointly developing the standards. So we as academics cannot define standards. We only can give the foundation to you, to the industry. And so that's why the consortium is so important. And what we also try is to integrate in the future, in the next year for our work in the board, is that we integrate our scales into existing media planning workflows. So by working with industry partners, we can try to ensure that new KPIs can be embedded into media booking platforms and media evaluation tools. And right now we are working on social sustainability readiness study. We are presenting the report end of April. I can share it with you, Stefan. And I can show you some pre-results. Just to give you an idea, what we did is we have a pretty large sample for the industry experts. We have over 300 participants and advertisers and all the stakeholders I mentioned before. And what we did is that they had to rate values, social values from media environments. And also, again, we need the stakeholder perspectives and the different perspectives, and we need to integrate them. And we cannot say, consumer wealth or privacy is important for me or for you, Stefan. And so that's it. So that is the standard. Because just to give you an idea of the data, you can already see here, for example, cultural contribution or privacy protection are highly discussed in our industry as very important social values of media. But based on our data, they are not so important for advertising decision makers. So that is just to give you an idea that we really need to integrate also the stakeholders, the decision makers, and the next step will be in our study to integrate the perspectives of different consumer segments. We are doing the value media evaluation process also for different consumer segments. So yeah, as I said, I can give you the results of the study report. And yeah, that's basically the way we approach this whole topic.
Interesting. Really looking forward to the details and probably the gap analysis, as there are obviously some discrepancies. From your perspective, it's going further down the road. The panel asked, Dimitris asked his panel guests before also about their perspective on the success factors for sustainability and which is going to drive sustainability change and success in the future. How do you see this from your the probably a little bit more broader academic and holistic with your more holistic ESG view on the same questions of the success factors?
Success factors to in terms of
to drive sustainable change in the industry.
What we basically saw in our previous research, what we also presented at American Marketing Association conference last year and also in February, is that we often see a misalignment between sustainability commitments and actual media budget allocation decisions. So we have a large gap in companies from advertiser side in these areas. So I think a major success factor is to that it has to be incorporated in media decision processes. So sustainability, what we also saw is that the picture in different corporations is very different. You have sustainability experts in PR, in the top management, but not really in the media decision processes. So many companies have ESG goals, but their advertising money often flows into lower value or even harmful media environments. So that is something from an organizational perspective what needs to change first in order to have to talk about success.
Yeah, from this perspective, the omnibus implementations of the European Union are probably not that bad. It gives us a little bit more time for setting industry standards in the place, which also helps at the end the decisions. On the other hand side, we on IAB side, we are quite a diverse group of participants with publishers, tech companies, and advertisers. Not that many advertisers, no, but also ad tech companies and agencies at the end. Given the diverse nature of industry, of this industry, what are from your perspective beside the success chances or challenges, at the end also critical elements for fostering effective collaboration between the diverse parts of the industry, which are you also trying to handle as you're trying to bring them on board?
Yeah, very good question. I think that is one of the main challenges, but also chances for the industry. I think industry leaders need to understand that cooperation will lead also to an economically more stable future for the whole industry. So we need really like a mind shift on this side, that they really understand it, that it's not just goodwill. It will help them economically growth in the futures and to bridge existing gaps. That's why we have established the Value Media Consortium, which acts as a collaborative platform. And we try to have all the different actors in the market, advertisers, publishers, etc., to co-develop industry-wide standards, because we believe that that's the only way that we can see an adoption of a so-called new KPI or additional KPI. And but first we need to understand what industry decision makers actually expect from media investments. And with our recent study, which I show you some first insights, we will next test if we can see differences in expectations between advertisers, media outlets, senior level management, etc. So that's something, if we want to establish a shared framework for sustainable media planning, I think we must ensure that all stakeholders' perspectives are reflected in the scale development. And that's what we try to ensure, that the standards are not just imposed from one side of the industry or from one initiative, but that all stakeholders who are interested in the process are collectively integrated and can build the new measures. And I think at the end of the day, sustainable media investments will only succeed if the entire ecosystem align with common goals. So that's what we are working towards. Yeah.
So, but at the end, you see in your vision or in your idea of sustainable media investments and value media, are they coming closer together with the given industry KPIs? Is the move of Scope 3 the company Scope 3 going into brand safety and suitability one of the first needed steps to bring the worlds more together?
Probably, but I think we need to go beyond brand safety. But for initiating the process, I think brand suitability and brand safety are first things, and even these KPIs are not standardized in all systems. So we also have to work on these standards as well. But I think the main thing, I cannot see it now. We are starting, as I said, today, and we will have 3 years now. So
probably it's not bringing together given KPIs with your progressive or new idea or development of value and sustainable media investment. Probably these are more kind of new KPIs which you're going to try to develop.
Yeah, or at least we will. I mean, we will not have a KPI ready in 3 months. So, but what we are doing on the academic side is just to give you an idea of a scale development processes in academia. It usually takes 3 years, but we will have like outputs every year, so we can give our partners and also we will publish it, so it's not a black box. We will regularly give the process and the between stages, which can already be used as a framework for something like value media planning, or at least for the materiality analysis stages of companies when advertisers would like to incorporate advertising and media planning in the materiality stage. So that can be used already with our framework, what we published.
This can and should be used for the industry or parts of the industry to prepare for the incoming changes or setting up kinds of association-driven standardizations. Yeah,
and they can already, I mean, they can use it for reporting, and for example, in the governmental aspects, they can, I mean, for example, build a framework, what is ethical advertising allocation or media budget allocation, and publish it and make it transparent. So that is something you can already do as an advertiser. Or yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much at this point. Do you have something from your side you want to add beside questions on my side, or do we have any questions from listening side as well? Feel free now to put in the questions mentioned from Sam, Christoph, and Moritz. More going to the panel before. We are picking them up, or Dimitris is going to picking them up. Yeah, probably the Moritz question is something incremental carbon social health impact of the advertised products or services may be well bigger than the carbon impacts of the media itself discussed so far. The advertised emissions is often a topic which can also go with social, which can go hand in hand with social questions as well. Are the advertised not only the emissions but the advertised also impact of products advertised are in the scope as well, or is there kind of, for you, Lisa, or is there kind of a scope down if you're going down the supply down the value chain?
A scope for the S&G?
The scope of your vision of the KPI and the product. Sometimes there's in advertising there's an idea driven in Germany by Otto Brenner Stiftung, for example, or in the UK from purpose disruptors, which are taking into account that on ecological side there's also products at the end which have advertised as well. That's the idea from the financed emissions. Is this something you're taking into account from a social or from a more holistic approach as well?
Oh, we should definitely.
Okay.
I think it should be in the board. I would say.
So the health impact, for example, of products on the people and
what you say, the health consumer protection aspect, for example, is something what we can also already measure, and it also can be a differentiation aspect for media outlets. So,
but then as soon we are talking about, for example, health issues of advertised products, it will be difficult as we have to talk about responsibilities. But there are there really responsibilities on advertising or on publisher or agency or ad tech side in these cases?
Yeah, but at least, I mean, you can integrate it in the ESG aspects for the ethical aspects that companies or advertisers can say or report that they are not willing to support or invest in media environments which are harmful for certain segments. That is something you can already do without any correlations between media budget allocation and harmful health destroying environments. So,
but at this end, it will be really a challenging discussion for every participant because you're going to responsibilities. For those who not know the ESRS bullets, Lisa showed them before. They are the orientation in between the new reporting standards of the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. And there, a couple of these ESRS bullets are, as Lisa mentioned, social driven, and they are the baseline. The ESRS matrix is the baseline of every new reporting, sustainability reporting. So it comes more and more into the view of companies as soon we are seeing more companies reporting according to CSRD at the end. And Moritz, in your direction, as this is developing now the next years, and it's moving, as we have heard in the panel with Dimitris, for sure. I think this should be also in the scope of IAB itself, and in the scope of the industry, as it will be part of the industry reality at the end. But for the moment, we there are so many uncertainties and regulatory bases. So we should take the time to address these kind of discussions, and even if it's a kind of more academic approach for the moment with Lisa, these are exactly, from my perspective, the baselines, how we how we have to get closer to these kind of holistic ideas of an ESG question for the future. So saying this, thank you very much, Lisa. And thank you very much, everyone. Stayed with us now 2 hours, and I'm handing over finally to Dimitris to give some final words to all the listeners. See you soon, everyone.
Thank you, Stefan. Very interesting fireside. Specifically interesting to see that there are some shared challenges, perhaps between initiatives addressing environmental impact as well as social impact. Heard a lot of things about managing to bias media spend using these KPIs, and in general, interesting to see how some of these things might be quantified to facilitate such a process. I'm not sure if we have the deck to go back to. Oh, there it is. I don't see it yet. In any case, we'll put up some slides with updates pertaining to upcoming events. Should be loading now. Yes. We have our membership town hall on the 26th of March. And then on the next slide, I believe we have Interact, 20th and 21st of May in Brussels. So feel free to look for the links on the deck that will be shared in order to get your early bird tickets. That being said, unless we have any other event updates, I would like to thank you very much for joining us today for this webinar. I hope you all found it interesting, and wishing everyone a pleasant afternoon.